Good morning. We are here for the Dania Beach City Commission Workshop. It's Friday, April 19, 2019 at 11 a.m. Can we please call the roll?
Mayor Llewellyn.
Here.
Vice Mayor Odman.
Here.
Commissioner Brandemart.
Here.
Commissioner Harris.
Here.
Commissioner James.
Here.
City Manager Garcia.
Here.
City Attorney Ensbrough.
Here.
Thank you.
Our first item up is the classification and compensation study, and I believe the city manager had something to introduce this with.
Yes, good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, city team that's here with us today. Today, we have a very important guest, and that's Lee Bushell from Evergreen. For the past couple of weeks, we've been assessing the Evergreen report on comp and classification, and I know how important that is for all of you and for all of us as we continue to evolve into the best version of our team serving the citizens of Dania Beach. We want to make sure that we are able to retain and recruit the very best to be able to provide the best services for our citizens. So with that said, I'd like to bring up to the podium and introduce to you Lee Bushell from the Evergreen Group.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right. Let's see if this works. All right, so let's talk about the study that we've been working on for most of the last year. It's been a while. So what I'm going to do is talk about the methodologies and that we used in doing the study. We collected a lot of data. We collected data from employees as well as your competitive peers. And so we're going to talk about how we integrate that into a compensation and classification study. We'll talk a little bit about your compensation philosophy. What is that? Well, that's how you would like to move your employees through a pay system or a pay plan. We're going to talk about the results of the study. We're going to look at some detailed data on how you stacked up against your peers. We'll look at certain jobs and how they compared to the peers as well. We're going to go into some options about how to transition employees onto the new pay plan and the cost associated with those. So we have a couple of options we'd like to go over. We've narrowed down from several options, and we'll talk about in detail those. That's not the right way. All right. So what we've completed so far, about a year ago or several months ago, my colleague came down and interviewed the project team, department heads, as well as all of the employees to get them familiar with what a compensation and classification study is. One of the things we always tell employees is it's not about employees, it's about the jobs and the classifications. So that's what we always tell employees as they're filling out something called the job assessment tool. And that's the survey tool that we use to collect data on the jobs that employees do. So we came down and met with the employees, and we also collected data at the sort of a snapshot at the time. And what we do is analyze how employees are progressing through the current pay plan. That's called an assessment of current conditions. We also talked with the project team about the compensation philosophy, maybe where you'd like to head as far as that. A lot of places are going toward performance, merit-based solutions. We also look at the internal equity. So what is internal equity? Every organization has a hierarchy of jobs, starting with the city manager on down to custodian. All the jobs have a relative value, and the job assessment tool is the data that we collect from employees, and that allows us to measure that internal equity. So for every job, we have a score, if you will, of the relative value of that job. When we combine that with the survey data, that allows us to propose new pay grades for each of the jobs in the city. So again, we take internal equity, which is based on the job assessment tool data, which every employee was asked to fill out, and we went through a lot of back and forth with the project team on getting those JAT scores right. So also we conducted a customized salary survey. So what we did is and we'll show you the peer list in a minute. Most of the communities in Broward County, some surrounding counties as well, to get what we ask of the peers is to provide what are they paying their employees, and not actual salaries, but what ranges, what pay ranges. And then we compare you to an average of those ranges, and we come up with how far you're behind or at market, and you're a little bit behind, but keep in mind that each individual job that we surveyed may be above or below the market, and I'll show you what those look like as well. So at the end of the process, we utilized internal and external equity, and we developed a new pay plan. We're going to show you what that looks like, and we assigned pay grades for all of the job classifications in the new pay plan. All right, so this is just a snapshot of the current pay plan at Dania Beach. So you've got a civil service and union pay plan. There are 16 grades in the civil service, 17 in the union plan, and you can see the numbers of employees that covers, and that was several months ago now. You got 44 employees in the civil service and 100 in the union plan. Now, range spread is a measure of the width of a pay grade. So, and currently you have somewhere around 52 to 55%. So it's basically a measure of from the minimum to the maximum in percentage terms. So that's what we like to see. That's at the low end. Typically we see 50 to 70%. The pay plan we're going to recommend is going to have slightly larger range spreads at the higher grades. The next slide shows where employees currently are in their pay plan. So this is a really good distribution. We typically don't see this. When we're hired to do these studies, you usually see a clustering of employees in the first two quartiles. So obviously you're moving employees throughout the pay plan. The problem is the pay plan is a little bit behind overall, and some classifications are just in the wrong grade. So we're remedying in that solution. So, but this is a positive for the current leaders and the current pay plan. All right, compensation philosophy. So what is your desired market position? Some communities may want to be ahead of the market. Most want to be competitive. And as I'll show, you're slightly behind the market, so we're going to make some adjustments, or we're going to propose some adjustments. Pay practices, equitable, flexible, everybody would like that. What does that mean? That just means that you're going to apply consistent policies to all of your employees. Pay plan design, we're going to stick with an open range design. I heard earlier today you did have a step plan previously in years past. Open range is what we're going to propose as well. All right, so let's talk about the survey that we did. Here are the list of the communities that we asked to provide data, 19 of them, most Broward County communities. We also did Palm Beach County as well as Miami-Dade. Now, so what this represents is the market for your employees. This is where the potential pool of employees live and work, and those are employees that, or those are people that you could hire from and also lose employees too. So that's what's considered the market. There are 19 peers. And again, this is where employees can come from or go to. So we take 40 positions. So obviously the city has more than 40 positions. So we take a subset, and we have a process by which we choose a subset. It's a random sample. We cover every grade. We make sure all levels are represented. So what we do is we can, as long as we have JAT scoring for, and we do, for all of the classifications, and we have market data for 40 of the positions, we can slot pay grades appropriately into the new plan for all of the jobs. So again, these are the peers that we collected data from. All right, so let's get to the meat of the study. So what we found was that Dania Beach was overall about 3% behind their peers. It's a little different, 2.6 at the minimum, 3.3 at the midpoint, almost 4 at the maximum. So that by itself doesn't sound that bad, but if you look at some of the positions individually, and these are the first 20 of the 40 that we surveyed, you can see, for example, that Deputy City Clerk was almost 30% behind, Code Compliance Manager 10% behind, I'm reading at the minimum. And then you have beach lifeguards ahead of the market. So every job there's a lot of variability here. Overall, you're about 3% behind, but each job is different, as you can see there. So we use this data to slot individually these jobs into the appropriate grade after learning what we have from the market data. Here's the next 20. You can see there's maintenance workers. Level 1 is about 11% above. 20% behind is public works manager. So you see there's some variability. Again, these are not all of the jobs, but we're able to extrapolate from these 40 to the probably 100 classifications you have in the city here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you. I understand that you only surveyed 40, but with your technology and however you said swapping that, are you able to show us the rest of the jobs? Because I'm interested to see what's the difference, because some of these are 30% and 17%, and other ones are 11% ahead. And so are you able to provide us with some type of data that would give us a roundabout of where the other positions are that are on here?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, certainly. And keep in mind, just because something's above market, we're not going to recommend a reduction in any kind of range. We always let the market catch up, but we are going to make suggestions to bring the ones that are behind market to market. Absolutely. All right, so the next slide is our proposed pay plan. So this is what we use best practices when we build a new pay plan, and what I mean by that is, well, how do we come up with a minimum? Well, we look at the market data and what is the average minimum for all of those peers, and it is about 25,800. It's probably not exactly that. And then we do the same thing at the top end. What is the highest, or what is the average maximum of all 19 of those peers? And it was about 90,000. So that is the maximum. And then we build all the grades in between. And let's focus on the range spread. So currently you have 52% to 55% range spread. So what we're going to do is start out at the low grades and have a 50% range spread. That just means the width of the range spread is going to be 50% in the lower grades. It's going to increase to 55% in the approximately, I'm having a hard time focusing on it, about grade 110. They also have grade progression. So what is grade progression? That's the gap between the grades at the midpoint. So we're going to increase those. So as you get to the higher grades, you're going to get a bit bigger bump or a bigger gap between grades. The reason you have larger range spreads in the higher grades is typically you're not hiring in employees at the minimum. You're bringing in experienced people. You're going to bring them in higher than the minimum. They're going to have more room to grow, so you have a wider range spread in the higher grades. By the way, we've recommended reducing the number of grades from 33 to 26. You just don't need that many grades for the number of jobs you have. So I already mentioned about how we came up with the minimum and the maximum as well. So here's sort of a summary of the range spreads in the lower grades. The first 9, 50%, the next 10, 55, going on up to 60, and then 70 for the highest grades, 125 and 126. The progression increases from 5% all the way up to 7% as well. So this is a typical fan-shaped open range pay plan that you see in practice today. All right, so what we've done is developed options. Now that we've got a pay plan to work with, we're going to transition employees onto that new pay plan. So the first thing you always do is, well, we're going to bring employees to the new minimum. If somebody's below that new minimum, that's sort of the minimum option of adopting a pay plan, is to start all the employees to the new minimum. And there's some cost associated with that. But we also want to transition employees other than bringing them to the minimum. We want to move them. There's multiple ways to do that. We've explored multiple options. So there's a lot of words on this slide, so let me just describe this. So what we do is we look at all of your employees and we calculate something called a compa ratio. That's simply their salary divided by the midpoint. So we're finding out where employees are relative to the midpoint. So if somebody is at midpoint, they would have a 100% compa ratio. If they're already above midpoint, we're going to set them aside and not do anything just yet. So basically, the midpoint is a proxy for the market. That's when employees are performing satisfactorily and proficiently. So that's why it's called, the market is considered the midpoint. So what we do is we then place the employees that are at midpoint or below into 3 buckets based on their time in class. So how long someone's been in their current job. So if they've been there less than 3 years, we put them in one bucket. If they've been there a little longer, say 3 to 7 years, we put them in another bucket. And then longer tenured employees, those greater than 7 years in the same job, we put those in a third bucket. So then what we do is we move their compa ratio. If, for example, if somebody's at 75% and they were hired a year ago, we may move them to 79%. If they've been here 7 years, we would move them to 81%. So what we're doing is, that's how we increase their salary. We're taking their compa ratio and adding a couple percentage points based on their tenure in their class. So when we do the cost calculations for all the employees in Dania Beach, that comes up to be about $65,000 without benefits, and the benefits have been added there, and it's about $75,000. That affects 79 employees, 10 exempt, and 69. So that is what we call the move toward market, and we call it a 3-tier because we're dealing with 3 buckets. Everybody midpoint or below. We're not dealing with anybody above midpoint because they're already performing proficiently and satisfactorily. That's the definition of somebody at or above midpoint. So that's the first option we explored. The next option is, well, we really want to get people closer to the market point or the midpoint, especially if they've been here a long time. We tweaked the break points, the bucket break points. So what we did here is we looked at employees that have been here between 1 and 2 years, 2 and 5 years, and then greater than 5 years. We want to get those employees to the midpoint. So again, we take a look at their compa ratio, and if they've been here longer than 5 years, we want to move them wherever they are below the midpoint to the midpoint, which is what this option is trying to do. So you can see the costs go up here because you're moving a lot more employees. You're giving adjustments to more employees. We're dealing with the same number of employees, but we're giving larger adjustments because we're moving them all the way to the midpoint. So the cost here without benefits, $168,000. When you add benefits, a little over $200,000. So again, we're rewarding tenure, tenure meaning time in their current job, and based on where they are currently, what they're currently being paid. So a couple of factors go into that. So what we've also come up with, and this I believe is staff's recommended option, is to phase in that latter option. We want to move employees to the midpoint, especially if they've been there longer than 5 years, but we want to phase this in over 3 years, and here's what that would cost. So what we do is we look at each individual employee's adjustment and give them a third of that in year 1, and the next third, and then the final third in year 3. And October 1 fiscal year is when we would start that, October 1st, 19, 20, and 21. That number there does include the benefits that have been added, so $68,000 a year, approximately.
I have a question.
Yes.
About that. It's me.
Hey.
How are you choosing which employees you're giving these benefits to each year?
Okay, well, we look at the time and tenure. We've calculated that, so every employee has a time in class, and it's anywhere from 0 to greater than 10 it could be. But we look at their current compa ratio, which is their current salary. So actually, if somebody's been here greater than 5 years, we're going to move them to midpoint within 3 years if we phase it in. So that's the criteria. So everybody below midpoint, at or below midpoint, is going to be moved to midpoint either all at once or within 3 years.
Well, that's my question. Like, how are you making that determination as to which ones are going first, for example?
Oh, everybody gets a third of their adjustment. So we've
Okay,
calculated
thank
the
you.
total adjustment for everybody, and then we give each
Gotcha.
employee a third. I'm
Thank you.
sorry. Yes.
Thank you. That's what I
Yeah.
was not understanding. Go ahead.
Okay.
We have questions too.
Yes.
I forgot my question I asked. Okay, when you're doing this, because I'm looking at it from a budgetary standpoint, are we including the city manager and the city attorney and the CRA and their staff? Because if that's not included, then that...
Every employee in the city is included in our analysis.
So, okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm reading every bit of this, and I got a couple questions. Number one, what if a city can't afford to, as you got here, overall, what you're telling them they're behind in? What if a city can't afford to bring it up to what your expectations are based on Fort Lauderdale, or we'll say Hollywood?
Well, you're going to stay behind. You're behind now, and then if you don't make some adjustments, at least bringing to the minimum, it's just going to be you constantly be behind, and you're not going to be able to retain good employees.
All right.
Because they're going to go elsewhere.
All right, now, as you know, we have a union contract coming up, right? When you state in here on this here about the 2.6% behind the minimum, 3.3% behind midpoint, and let's say that we were wanting to give them a 5%, just as a point, in the union contract, based over, we'll say, a 3-year contract. How does that fit into your study?
I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, are you talking about a COLA?
Is that going to be on top of this?
That would be
No,
correct.
ma'am.
That would be correct.
Yes, do you want to jump in here, Finance
Are you
Director, and
crazy?
answer Commissioner Brandy Mark's concern, please?
No, it ain't on top of it. Then we don't need a union. Try getting rid of them.
The intent of this study is actually just to take the existing positions and the existing employees here and bring them to market under current conditions. So this estimated amount, either 75, 205, or the 3-year plan, will get them to the current market condition. In addition to that, there's going to be obviously employees that are not included in this market because they're already at market. So if the city commission wishes to engage in a collective bargaining agreement or administratively decide that they want to provide a COLA or another negotiated increase in addition to this, it would be on top of this market adjustment.
Nikki, stay there, okay, honey? Listen, so in other words, if we did a union contract for 3 years and we agreed on, say, 5% increase, are you saying that they could get a 9% increase if I factor in manager? You know what I'm talking about. Because you deal with unions like I do.
Absolutely, Commissioner, and that is the question that I've been having with the finance team and the HR team, and this is all negotiable, but we definitely wanted to be transparent and make sure that we could provide you those numbers, because in addition to this, we have also calculated what a 2% would be, what a 3% would be, what a 4% would be, and what a 5%, and that's information that is available to you as well.
And did you include benefits?
Everything that you see up there, when I first saw it, did not include benefits. It does include benefits now.
Now, I may sound ridiculous to a lot of you, but we get the same raises that we get for the union. So I'm really fighting against my own self. To give any employee, just because this says we're behind, close to a 10% increase, I think that's ludicrous. I do. That's only my opinion on it. And let me tell you, I've been working as a business agent with the unions for 18 years. And this pay study here is like saying, throw the union out because we can do this on our own. We don't need anybody doing this. We can do it on our own. There don't even have to be a negotiation. Just bring the union in here and agree to it. That's my feelings on it.
Commissioner James?
Sorry, thank you. This was initially brought by myself when I was first elected, because I asked for the classifications and this pay of all of our employees, and I knew that a lot of our employees were below market value. Even with the percentages that they get every single year now, they're still below market rate. And we lose very valuable employees because they're not up to market value and they can work elsewhere and make more money. Now, this is not saying that, so you could have one position that's in the union and that's at market rate and they won't get any adjustments because they're at market rate. And then, from my understanding, you can have another employee that's 2% behind, and that would just bring them up to the regular standard. My intent for this study was to bring all of our employees up to a standard first, because a lot of our employees are overworked and underpaid. Now, once they get there, then we can negotiate with the union. But if you look at it as a whole, some of the employees, one employee may get a 9% increase, but another employee may not get any increase. So whatever decisions that we make that are going to be in the shade meetings and with the union negotiations, we have to understand that every employee is not going to benefit from what you are seeing here.
And that's fair?
Yes.
Well, there are a lot of, in my opinion, there are a lot of employees that are way over market rate or that have been at market rate. And then we have a lot of employees that have been here for a very long time, as you can see from the numbers, who are not being compensated on the level that I feel like, or that the studies feel like are at market rate totally. And I don't think that's unfair. I think that, in my opinion, that everyone should be at least at market rate, regardless if we are giving them raises on top of that or not. If they're doing the work at market rate, we're not saying over market rate, we're not saying going crazy, but at least at a standard. I think that's something that we have to set together as a commission.
And I would agree with you, Commissioner James. I've actually been through a comp and class study before in a private company where we did this comparing with other private companies in the past. And in that situation, we found that a number of the employees were below minimum. And in that situation, we actually brought everybody up to the minimum. They did not bring people up to the midpoint. They did only bring them up to the minimum. And then others after that, it was over time that the other salaries were gradually increased so that it didn't bankrupt the company, basically. But it was done so that we could make sure that we did keep employees that needed to be here because they weren't being paid what everybody else was being paid. So it's something that is done frequently. Vice Mayor?
I just want to clarify because my memory doesn't remember from when I went over this with ACM Colin. So if somebody is currently, if they're above market rate, and I don't think that there was too many employees that were in that situation, but none of them would go down, is that correct?
Nobody's salary will be reduced.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so this is just going to bring everyone up to market rate, and if you are one of the few employees that happens to be above, you don't come down.
Just keep that salary.
Okay,
No
got it.
adjustments.
You can't bring them down anyway,
No.
unless you took
No.
away their job description. Then I think maybe, I don't know, even if you could do it then. If they're given less work to do in that department, you change your job description. I know I'm right, because like I said, I've been working with it for 18 years. Then you got a legitimate reason to say, look, I'm sending you to another department, but now that your workload is less, the job is going to pay less money. That's the way unions work. But in this case here, you can't take away their money anyway. So they're not in jeopardy. That's not what the point I was making. I just want to be sure that we have leverage when we deal in negotiations with the union. That's all I want, is that we have the leverage here. And in a department that I'm looking for, I don't even see it listed on here. I don't know whether you noticed it or not. Yeah, because they're missing. There are departments on here missing. For instance, jobs in the permitting department. I don't see anything on there other than a specialist or something.
City
What is that,
Manager?
Nikki?
And any of the jobs that would be over in the code enforcement or in the building department would be
Yeah.
rolled under the community development heading up here.
Under what?
Community development. They all
Like
fall
that. I
under the
never
umbrella
see
of
it.
community
I wanna see
development.
it. Huh? It's not there? Okay.
City Manager?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Answering what Commissioner Brandy Mark brought up, it's important to note that if at any point an employee is demoted or reclassified, that employee will go down or up according to their job specification.
That's what I said.
Okay. Go ahead.
It's
All right,
a
so
way to
this
get rid of
slide-
somebody.
I think this is off.
That's mute. It's on.
There we go. All right, so this slide shows the cost that I've already outlaid for you by department. So I mentioned the bring to minimum, and that is the minimum option that you would want to choose to adopt the proposed pay plan. And there are the costs associated with bringing those below the proposed minimum to the minimum by department, a little less than $9,000. So those costs are also included in the columns to the right. So the red option is the option where I talked about moving toward market, but not actually to market, and based on the breakpoints of greater than 7 years at the high end. The light blue is the preferred option because that moves your employees all the way to the market if they've been there longer than 5 years, and then we can phase that in 3 years. Estimated benefits down below as well. All right, so the plan for implementation is to adopt the compensation and classification plan structure. That is the pay plan itself. We've recommended revising certain pay grades based on the market data and the JAT scoring as I've outlined, and adjust per the adopted comp and class plan structure. I believe staff would like to implement October 1st and the following 3 fiscal years. Administering and maintaining the new pay plan, we actually provide training on doing this, and we also provide training on grading new positions as they become available. We also recommend that we do a study like this every 3 to 5 years. Of course, we want to keep doing this type of work, but in 3 to 5 years, you're gonna need to survey the market again and go through one of these. That's typically what we recommend. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? So, what are we
Basically,
doing
Mayor,
next?
this was just a workshop, and this was a directive from the commission, and we're grateful for that directive because it was certainly needed. And we want to move in the direction that's financially responsible, but at the same time address the needs of our team as we move towards retaining and recruiting the best individuals to provide the best services to our citizens. So the next step would be, based on your guidance and direction, is to bring this for adoption at an upcoming commission meeting.
So we would have to decide on which one of the plans we want to go with.
Finance Director, would you like to give us some guidance
Well, can we
in
ask
regards
questions on
to?
this first?
Commissioner James has something to add as well.
Yeah, I have questions on this before we move to that steps, if I can. I have a few questions. I'm looking at the numbers, and on this red slide, oops, on, I don't know what page it is, page 12? Oh, that one.
The first one.
If you add both of the employees, it's 79, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we go to the implementation, it drops down to 75. Why is that?
No, it was 75 on the first page.
Yeah, so that's actually right, because some employees are moved to the, and I noticed this before too, I said, why don't those numbers match? Because some employees are moved to the minimum, they're brought to the minimum, so there's an overlap of who would already be. So 4 of those have already been moved to the minimum, so it's 75 instead of 79. And
Who has been moved to the minimum when?
Well,
What?
let me go to this slide. So, and when you break out in a phased option, let me get back to this. The bring to minimum costs are not included in this. So there's a discrepancy between the number of employees because of that. And I'm probably not adequately explaining that, but I can make you understand it when I have the numbers in front of me. But
Oh,
So I
Yeah,
think
I'm
what's
confused.
happening is 4 employees have already been brought to the minimum, so they're not going to be included in this
but
total
when did
here.
this happen? If,
No, so we bring to the minimum regardless, and it's just a few employees, about $9,000 worth. If we go back to this slide here, see that? So that 8,900 is included in the 168 on the right, but also if you 168 divided by 3 is not that number there.
okay.
Well, it's actually, I should be doing the 205. So if you do the 205 divided by 3, it's not exactly that amount because you're adding in the bring to minimum cost. Whereas on this slide, the bring to minimum costs are included in that 168, which filters down to the 205.
So when we bring to the minimum, those employees in the purple tier, they would
Yes.
not be included in the light blue tier of the 3 years?
On the 3-year, they're
So
not
they-
included.
No, they're
Yeah.
going to just
There's-
take care of them
it's separate.
first, and
Yes,
then these
yes.
will be the
Yeah.
rest.
When you do a phase-in, you bring them to the minimum, and then you do the phased amounts. So that, if you do it all at once, that 205,000 already includes that 9,000 over to the left there. So,
Okay. My second question is, why are we reducing the grades, and what does that mean for, our employees and their growth that they could have here?
for an organization this size with the number of jobs classifications, you just don't need that many grades. And when we built the pay plan, remember I said we started out with a minimum that is representative of the peer market and a maximum that is representative of a peer market. So then we build in the grades in between using the appropriate range spreads and grade progression, so you just don't need that many.
So does this plan reduce any of the grades?
It reduces the number of grades, but it doesn't reduce nobody's salary is going to be reduced because of this.
But would their grade be reduced?
Well, the grades are completely different numbering systems, so they may be in a different grade that's lower, but their salary will not be reduced. So.
Okay. And when you compare that to other cities, do you compare the grades, or are you just comparing the salaries?
Actually, good question. We don't compare actual salaries, we compare the grade ranges. So when we ask the neighboring communities for their, on a survey, we say, provide us the minimums and the maximums. We also ask for their actual salary data, but what we use in the survey data is the ranges. So we're comparing your ranges to the market ranges.
So the market ranges of the other cities, they don't have ranges over 26?
Number of pay grades?
Correct.
Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
We don't really survey that. We survey, well, we do survey. We don't really. I don't have how many grades each of the peers have.
Okay.
But I think the new number is an appropriate number of grades for the city your size, number of jobs.
Okay, I just want to make sure it
Yeah.
translate if someone decides to look into a job somewhere else and they're not looking at because their grade was reduced here, that translates to a different salary there. Because if they had a higher grade there, it would mean that, they're on a higher level. But if
Yeah.
we've put them
Yeah.
down, how are we? I don't know how that looks on paper.
The only reason we would move them down if we might move their grade down if the market indicated and their JAT scores, if they weren't doing the job that they were before. Maybe their duties
Okay.
have changed over time. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And that would be done by evaluation anyway, right?
Performance evaluation? Yeah. Or that'll also be reflected in the revised job descriptions that we're doing. Yeah.
If you're right, if the job is taken away, then that also factors into pay rises.
Commissioner Harris?
At the time this was done, did it take into consideration the number of vacant positions, or now maybe there's a few more vacant positions? Is that factored in at all?
Well, we make sure we collected data on all the vacant positions. So we had, if there was a vacant position and nobody was in that position, we made sure that somebody filled out a JAT, either a supervisor or somebody with knowledge of that job. So certainly, yeah.
Commissioner James?
Lastly, is there an option that this be phased in over 2 years, and how does that look versus 3?
Well, it would be approximately the
Well,
same.
can we just have that as an option? Because it just
Yeah,
gave us
we
1
could,
and
we
3.
could do that. I mean, it's going to be the same total amount, just in 2 years instead of 3. So it would be,
90,000.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
maybe like 90 to 100,000 per year.
approximately 100, a little over 100,000 in,
Okay, I just want us to look
Yeah.
at that as an option
Yeah.
too, because that is an option.
yeah.
And just 1 and 3. Okay.
So what is our next step at this point? Nikki, do you need us to come up with a decision as to which option we want to go with, or what do we need to do?
Yeah, that's what our next step is for the commission to basically make a consensus, a recommendation on which path we think we want to go to. What I wanted to talk to you about is a couple of different things, though. When this first came to us and we were looking at one of the final options was this one, which is a 7-year break point. One of the things that the comp and class team had discussed is it really appeared that 7 years seemed kind of an excessive amount of time for an existing employee to get to market. We felt that if somebody's been here for 5 years, at 5 years you're either doing your job or you're not doing your job, and so a 5 year seemed like a good point that someone would get to midpoint. So we had asked for the alternative plan to take a look at, which was the 2 year, 5 year, and then over 5. And of course, you can see there's a significant amount of difference between the two plans. The alternative to do this over a 3 year plan was presented just to kind of give you an idea of what that would look like. Although inherently, I think there might be a few concerns with doing that, and I'll tell you what I think they are. This is a 3 year phased-in plan. The problem is you're taking existing employees right now, and you're going to not even get them to the current market condition for 3 years by phasing it in. So that can be problematic for a couple of different reasons. We wanted to look at it in this option just for fiscal purposes and then kind of see where that landed. The other issue that you're going to have with that is you're still going to be trying to recruit people that into the current market condition. So, and retain people in the current market condition. So if you are to implement this in a 2 or a 3 year phase plan, you're going to be hiring in new people when you get a vacancy that you're going to want to bring at market, but yet you haven't brought your existing people to market. Right. So that can be very problematic. So from a financial standpoint, we've taken a look at the finances, and we're recommending that we implement the plan in its entirety, effective October 1. The reason I want to do October 1 is because that gives us a chance to incorporate it and build it into the existing budget that we're working on now. And that's going to let us see what the financial impact is going to be for next year, and that's going to allow us to look at all the other different personnel issues, and by then we'll know what our revenue stream is. I do believe the city, as you know, we've worked very hard to be in a stable financial condition, which we definitely are in. So I think if we're going to do this and we're going to actually get the employees to market, it would be best to do it in one step. But I advocate doing it October 1 to give us the opportunity to build it into the existing budget coming up so we can see the full impact in relationship to the rest of the city budget.
Commissioner James?
Yes, thank you. I actually like that option. My only question will be if this is adopted and is brought to the commission and it's voted and passed, the current open positions that you have, will they still be below market rate until October 1, or are the new positions going to be implemented in this new plan?
May I? I believe in uniformity, Commissioner. I really believe that as we're working on 2020, whoever we bring in, we're going to bring him at the existing, and then that adjustment will be made October the 1st to do it fairly across the board.
Well, that's what I would want, but I just want to make sure that that is what is going to be, and that's why I'm asking for clarification on that, because that's what I would suggest, and that's what I would recommend and want as well.
Yeah, and I don't think we wouldn't change the classifications, obviously, until October 1 either, so I think that's what the job descriptions would be.
Yes, it
Right.
would take into it would take into effect October the 1st, per your direction and your guidance.
Do we need a motion or a consensus?
We just need a consensus to be able to prepare the documents to bring to you.
Okay. Do we have a consensus on moving forward with the plan that our finance director has indicated?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I only ask that the gentleman sends us, all of us, the breakdown of all the positions and where they are and how that would affect each of the positions in its entirety.
That's fine.
Thank you. This concludes our the presentation of the comp and class. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
The next item is city commission budget. You want to take a break? Sure. Just take 5 minutes and then we'll come back.
Sure. 5 minutes.